Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the CORBEL webinar series. Today, we are very pleased to have with us Dr. Michele Haas from INFRAFRONTIER, and he's going to present quality management in distributed research infrastructures. My name is Vera Matzer, and I'm involved in the CORBEL project on behalf of and I'll be hosting the webinar today and manning the question function. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to make you aware of the fact that this webinar is being recorded. That includes the question and answer session at the end. And we will make it available on the CORBEL YouTube channel and on the CORBEL website. At the end, we've reserved some time for questions. And I would like to ask you to just write your question in the question function of GoToWebinar. And you can see the control panel on the slide here. And then we'll deal with the questions at the end of the presentation. I introduce the CORBEL project to you. So CORBEL is a Horizon 2020 funded project that brings together 13 research infrastructures in the biomedical science. CORBEL aims to transform the understanding of biological mechanisms and help translate them into medical care. Now, modern biological and biomedical research involves complex projects which often combine a variety of different technologies and operate at the interface between different disciplines. CORBEL aims to help these projects by harmonizing access and services from research involving more than one RI. So you can imagine that this could be biological and medical technologies, biological samples, or data services. So our presenter today is Dr. Michele Haas. He's a biologist and research manager. After his PhD and postdoc position in the field of behavioral physiology at Max Planck, he moved in 2008 to the Helmholtz Zentrum in München as lead project manager for the INFRAFRONTIER preparatory phase. And he's the head of the INFRAFRONTIER project office. Now, INFRAFRONTIER is the European research infrastructure for the development, phenotyping, archiving, genomes. And in 2010, Michele received an MSc degree in Science, Communication and Marketing at the Tech in Berlin. And since 2014, he's the head of the general management of INFRAFRONTIER GmbH, the management and coordination unit of INFRAFRONTIER research infrastructure. For the CORBEL project, he leads the work package on common access solutions and chairs the CORBEL quality management expert network. So at this point, I'm going to just hand over to Michele.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Vera, for the nice introduction. So I would like, for the next 45 minutes or so, I would like to entertain you about the topic of quality management in distributed research infrastructures. I guess as an initial remark, I should say that I'm not per se a quality management expert in that case. So I'm overseeing the implementation of a quality management system at the INFRAFRONTIER GmbH, which is the coordination and management unit of the INFRAFRONTIER research infrastructure. And we have hired an experienced quality manager. Her name is Hilke Ehlich, to do the actual implementation. So I'm overseeing this, and I'm actually learning on the task and on the job of about quality management. So during this webinar, I would touch upon the following contents. So I would like to introduce some basic quality management concepts, and then talk about our experiences of implementing a quality management system in a distributed research infrastructure. So our experience means the examples from the INFRAFRONTIER research infrastructure. And this will also cover the specific aspects of quality management that we encounter due to the fact, first, that we are research infrastructure, and then that we are a distributed research infrastructure. And finally, I would also like to talk a little bit about the Korbel activities for quality management capacity building. Okay. So before I start, I would like to give a few definitions. So we are talking about quality management, and so the definition of quality in the context of quality management would be the ability to deliver value through fulfilling the needs and expectations of your customers, users, and other relevant interested parties. And this includes also the expectations of the lawmakers. So also regulatory compliance is covered with this aspect. Quality is determined by the ability to satisfy customers' expectations and needs, and also the needs of other relevant interested parties, and is also determined by the ability to make impact on those parties. And in the end, it should also lead to a change in perception, in the perception of your customers and interested parties towards perceived value and benefit of your organization. Quality management in itself is a business philosophy with the idea that the long-term success of a company really comes or stems from this customer satisfaction. Also, this philosophy of quality management differs a little bit from applied quality management approach, and has also changed over the years. So let's say that some time ago, quality management was dealing more with errors, failures in products and how to avoid them. So how to achieve a better quality of products by the avoidance of failures and errors. Whereas today, this philosophy has more shifted towards this customer satisfaction and overall excellence of the organization. So quality management is the act of overseeing all activities and tasks needed to maintain this desired level of excellence, and it includes several steps like formulating a quality policy. It involves planning of processes and resources, and in the end, it should lead to a continuous improvement of the organization. So, if we look at quality management or compare it to a traditional business approach, then so the traditional business approach would look at the requirements of the customers, the market, take stock of what is in the organizations, so the strengths, weaknesses of the organization, the employees, the knowledge, the finance, the infrastructure, and the products, and then it would see to optimize the financial output. Whereas the quality management approach really targets the customer satisfaction to seek an advantage for the corporation, for the company. So one could say that the quality management approach has a longer outreach, a longer perspective than a pure financial output. And I will come to that back a little bit later when I talk about how this can be seen in a research infrastructure. So quality, I've talked about that, is the compliance to agreed requirements and specifications. It's very often subjective and it delivers value. You have quality assurance, which is looking at the products and the services that you deliver and ensure that these products are compliant with this level of quality that you agreed upon, but it's also including regulatory compliance. And you have quality management, which is a management tool, and it covers all the relevant processes in order to reach the quality goals. And a quality management system, so we had, comprises the activities by which the organization identifies the quality objectives and determines the processes and resources that are required to reach those objectives. And then it manages these processes and resources to provide the value to the customers and the other interested parties. So it's a management instrument that enables the top management of the organization to optimize the use of resources. So generally, it is seen that quality management is a task of the top level management. So the implementation may be done on other levels, but it should, so quality management really is a task of the top level management. And since the quality management has also a system of checking how the quality objectives have been reached, so that it means also to identify actions and to address consequences and to ensure continual improvement. But I will come to that later again. So I now switch a bit and provide some background on the INFRAFRONTIER research infrastructure. I do this very briefly, just in order to allow you to follow our approach of implementing our quality management system. So INFRAFRONTIER is the European research infrastructure for the generation, phenotyping, archiving, and distribution of mammalian models. So the main focus of INFRAFRONTIER is providing resources and services for studying human diseases using mice. And mice are used for studying human diseases because, and this is shown in this picture, because they're mice are genetically very closely related to humans, and therefore there can be similarities in the phenotype, and this is the bare patches here at the forehead and at the belly of the mouse and of the baby. And but underlying the similarity of phenotypes, there's also a similarity in genotype. So these mice share a mutation in a similar locus. And actually, what looks here, so this visible phenotype is not the only one for this particular disease, but there's actually a severe disease of neuronal development associated, and therefore it makes sense to study this in mice. So INFRAFRONTIER is providing, as I said, resources and services for researchers that would like to study human diseases using mice. So this covers the development of mouse models, but also a concept of what we call systemic phenotyping, where these where mutant mice are very thoroughly inspected in a pipeline of tests to really assess the effects of a given mutation on the entire organism. And INFRAFRONTIER is through EMMA, the European Mouse Mutant Archive, is also a biorepository for scientifically interesting mouse lines. So they are archived and distributed all over the world. And then there's other services like cancer models, specific germ-free mice to study, for instance, the microbiome in mice, and training and consulting. And all of this is offered through one central website, so www.infrafrontier.eu. So the access is offered through this website, which is hosted in Munich at the hub. But the actual services may be provided by the national nodes in different countries. INFRAFRONTIER has a worldwide user community. So, well, there's a large proportion of users in Europe, but we also have very many users in Asia and in the US. And INFRAFRONTIER is also participating in large international endeavors like the International Mouse Phenotyping Consortium, which is an international endeavor that kind of takes off from where the Human Genome Project started. So the Human Genome Project deciphered the entire human genome. So the letters of the alphabet or of the genome of the book of life have been deciphered, but in very many cases we don't know yet what the actual word means. So, and this is and therefore the International Mouse Phenotyping Consortium tries to put together a first comprehensive catalog of mammalian gene function, and this is done by comprehensively phenotyping knockout mice for each of the protein coding genes in the mammalian genome, and then to provide open access to the data and to the resources that are created, so also to the mice that have been created, and access to positive and negative results. And as you can see, the INFRAFRONTIER partners are more or less the European component of this international consortium. Okay, so why quality, or why did we opt for quality management in INFRAFRONTIER? First of all, of course, we wanted to increase our efficiency and reliability by coordination, standardization of procedures and resources, by also having transparent processes in place, and also preserving this knowledge and documenting this knowledge. We wanted also to create increased trust by the INFRAFRONTIER in the INFRAFRONTIER partners and other stakeholders by having the system in place, and of course also increased visibility, because approved quality management system can be seen as a label of excellence for research infrastructures, particularly if you have a system in place that has been certified by an external body. And all of this should contribute to the sustainability of the INFRAFRONTIER research infrastructure. So the steps of implementing a quality management system in our case were to analyze, or are to analyze, the organizational context, then to define the scope of the quality management system and to choose a fitting quality management approach, define the quality strategy, the quality policy, identify and describe the relevant processes, define the quality goals, and then enter into this, well, implementation, plan, do, check, act, and to improve. And I will talk a little bit about all of those points, or most of those points. So this would be kind of the textbook approach of implementing a quality management system. I would like to start with this first point. So analyzing the context of an organization, and there you can use existing, or you should use existing elements describing the organization's purpose, so including its vision, mission, the policies that are in place, the objectives that have been written down, and then to identify the all internal and external factors that act on the organization. So if we come to INFRAFRONTIER, and there, so here this picture shows the slide shows the INFRAFRONTIER research infrastructure, and we have the INFRAFRONTIER GmbH as coordination and management unit here, and then we have national infrastructure or national service providers, national nodes. So one of the things that already is apparent from this picture is that distributed research infrastructure can involve many different partners, and these different partners may have different roles in the research infrastructure. So as you can see, so we have partners that do model development, that do phenotyping, that do the archiving and distribution via EMMA. We have these partners that provide exonic services. We have partners that are mainly yet in the consortium or in our INFRAFRONTIER consortium to as networking partners. And if you look a little bit closer at the situation and try to generalize that a bit, so we have hubs and we have nodes, and hubs and nodes may provide different kinds of services, and they may provide the services to different interested parties. So if you think about the users of your research infrastructure, then the hub may actually very often provide services to the national nodes rather than directly to the users. And in other cases, it may also provide direct services to the users. And the same is true for the national nodes. They may also cater to different user communities or have different services, depending on their specialization and their role in your organization. So hubs and nodes may have different requirements in terms of quality management. Another thing, and this is certainly true for the INFRAFRONTIER research infrastructure, is that the nodes may have actually further developed quality management systems than the hubs. And so distributed research infrastructures are not well, like international corporations where the headquarters can kind of cook up a quality management system and quality management standards and then roll those out to their international branches. So in many cases, well, very often the national nodes may have been providing services and may have implemented quality management systems even before the European research infrastructure as such was constituted. So this also means that different nodes may have different quality management system and approaches in place. And another, I think, characteristic of the distributed research infrastructures is shown in the next slide. So different levels of regulatory frameworks apply. And this is shown here. So if you have the pan-European research infrastructure, you usually have a European hub and the national nodes. And then there's, of course, policies that the research infrastructure is giving itself, like access policies, other kinds of policies, intellectual property, IP policies, and so on. Then there may be cross-research infrastructure frameworks, like the BMS quality management framework, and I will talk about that at the end of this webinar. So generally, there are European level regulations that have that have to be complied with, like the General Data Protection Regulation. There's other frameworks like the Charter of Access. You have international treaties, conventions, agreements like the Nagoya Protocol. And then, of course, the national nodes, they will also have to comply to national regulations. So let me see. One other, I think, specific characteristic of, well, let's say research organizations, and which also applies to distributed research infrastructures, is that the relationship between this customer satisfaction and financial output. So in a commercial company, you would usually have a quite direct relationship, particularly, well, if you sell goods and services and your customers are not satisfied, then your financial output may suffer. In the case of research organizations, very often publicly funded, or at least in part publicly funded, this direct linkage may not be that obvious. So your financial output or your sustainability may actually relay on the satisfaction of other interested parties, like your funders. Yeah. Nevertheless, there will be, or there should be, an indirect relationship between your financial sustainability and the satisfaction of the research infrastructure users and your ability to meet their demands. Okay. So maybe going quickly back to this slide. In our approach, in our strategy, so the first thing that we had to take into account is that we will not be able to implement a quality management system for the INFRAFRONTIER research infrastructure per se. And this is because some of our partners already have quality management systems in place. So our current implementation covers the INFRAFRONTIER coordination and management unit, but we are also installing an INFRAFRONTIER quality management network to see how the different solutions can then be aligned. So we have to do our first homeworks first and to implement the quality management system for the coordination and management unit. And in a parallel process, we will look into alignment of the existing solutions in the research infrastructure. Okay, so there are different quality management approaches that can be applied, depending also on, well, first the level, hub or node, and what the specific requirements are. So there are the GXP approaches like good manufacturing practice, good laboratory practice, good clinical practice. There's international standards like the ISO specification for management systems. There's others for laboratories, medicinal devices, and others. You have total quality management concepts like the excellence model of the European Foundation of Quality Management, and there's other solutions like Six Sigma, etc. Maybe a bit more detail about those systems. So the GXP is let's say a highly regulated approach, and this comes from from drug development, where you need highly regulated rules, particularly in the area of clinical trials, but also then in manufacturing the drugs or medicinal devices. So the good manufacturing practice, the good clinical practice. But if you are in the area of preclinical studies, you may also want to apply the GLP, the good laboratory practice. Oops. And particularly if you want to provide or to act with your research infrastructure or with your national node, if you want to act as a contact research organization, as a CRO, there the GLP, the application of GLP is usually required. You have the ISO 9001, which is about the quality management. So it's about managerial process. It's an international standard formulated by ISO, the International Standards Organization, and it focuses on a consistent delivery of products and services to meet the requirements of customers and relevant interested parties, and it aims to enhance customer satisfaction. And there's the EFQM excellence model. So you have the European Foundation of Quality Management, and they provide a solution, or their approach is targeting overall quality so of the organization. So it's a total quality management approach, a journey to excellence. So the entire organization, all business processes and all stakeholders are taken into account. There is a nice overview because about the concepts, so the similarities, but also the differences between the ISO approach and the EFQM approach. I had to put this copyright marker of it because this is from an ebook that is issued by EFQM. Or overall, one can say that the EFQM approach is a bit wider and covers more of the organization than the ISO, which really focuses on meeting customer requirements and enhancing customer satisfaction. So for the INFRAFRONTIER research infrastructure, we chose ISO 9001. And we are currently in the process of implementing this. As I said, quality management is a management tool, and usually when you look at the top level management of an organization, you would also have strategy development there. So the mid to long-term strategy of the organization. So what usually is already in place, and it was certainly in place for INFRAFRONTIER, is vision, mission, values. And then you do an analysis of the internal environment, the external environment. There's different instruments for that, like SWOT, PEST, PESTLE, and so on. And from that, you define your strategic goals, which would then find implementation in the work programs, annual, biannual, and then you would measure the performance of in these different areas, and then feed that back into the analysis of your organization. So this actually interacts also with the quality management and the first steps, because what you would describe in the is the quality policy of your organization, and this is certainly involved as well by vision, mission and values of your organization, and you can actually draw on this analysis that is being done in general in the general strategy development. What is important is that you identify relevant processes, and I will come to that, because usually the quality management will not necessarily cover all aspects of your organization unless you follow a total quality management approach like EFQM. And then identify the quality goals, and the quality goals would relate to your overall quality policy, but they will also relate to your relevant processes, because usually for each of the processes you would also formulate goals. And then we enter into the act of implementations. So plan, do, check, act, but I will come to that. And of course, once this is implemented, this will also affect the overall strategy of the organization. So we have here the quality policy of INFRAFRONTIER, and I show this because there's certain, let's say, headings, and these headings or headers are strongly influenced by ISO. So the quality policy or the formulation of the quality policy will also be informed and influenced by the quality management approach that you choose. As I said, so the next step would be to identify the processes that are important for delivering your good services and for delivering or value to your customers. So you have interested parties and their requirements, and usually you know about that from your analysis about the context of your organization. And then you have a certain output, which will lead to the satisfaction of the interested partners, and then you would have processes that lead towards this. You have core realization processes. In a business world, you would say these are the processes that help you to earn money. But then you have also support process, and you have management processes that you would need to enable or to steer these core and realization processes. So the identification of your core realization processes, you can ask your organization the question: so what are your customers? To whom do you provide the services? What are your partners, other interested parties? And what would they expect from you? What are their requirements? And these would then determine your core processes. This is the map of processes that we have currently developed for the INFRAFRONTIER Management Coordination Unit, the INFRAFRONTIER GmbH. And as you see, so it follows the same approach. We have the realization processes like communication services, like data integration, bioinformatics. We have management processes, and those management processes are not all of the management processes that we have in the INFRAFRONTIER GmbH, but only those that we would like to include in the current implementation of our quality management system. And then we have supporting processes. In our case, it's IT and meeting logistics. But this is work in progress, and so this is not the final document. What can help you then in formulating this processes is the turtle model, the so-called turtle model, where we have the process in the middle, you have an input and you have the output, and then you have certain questions that help you to define the process. So in order to achieve this output, what kind of installations, equipment do I need? What personnel do I need? So the level of training, knowledge, abilities in your personnel, what methods, procedures, instructions are applied, and also the results. So how is the performance measured? So how do you measure the results? Okay. Quality policy, as I said, defines or determines the quality goals. But quality goals should be formulated in a clear, achievable, and measurable way in order to really come up with values that you can measure. So target values that you can measure against the actual achieved output. And this is important to have means of corrective actions. So I've gone through these aspects of implementing a quality management system, and then once you have this in place, you can start the so-called PDCA cycle: plan, do, check, act, which would lead then to a continuous improvement of your system. At INFRAFRONTIER, for the implementation, we are still currently in this stage of planning and setting up the entire system. Okay, I would like to come back again to this slide that I already had up. So the hubs and the nodes in INFRAFRONTIER, they certainly provide different kinds of services. They have different interested parties and different requirements in terms of the quality management. We have partners that follow GLP, so good laboratory practice approach, which is a highly regulated approach. We have other partners that have ISO 9001 in place, and we decided to implement ISO 9001 also for the INFRAFRONTIER GmbH, so for the INFRAFRONTIER hub. We have certainly quality hub nodes that have long established long-standing implementation of quality management systems. An example would be the German Mouse Clinic here in Munich, but also our French partners. And there's also different quality management systems in place. So how we go about, and I said that, so we in INFRAFRONTIER now established the quality management system for the hub, but we are also implementing this quality management network, which looks at the existing solution, and exchange of experience takes place. And in the longer range, we would like to see what we can do in terms of alignment of the different approaches. But this is nothing that we can kind of roll out from the top. A bit, so in my last minutes, I would like to talk about our activities in Korbel. And again, the slide of the 13 research infrastructures, which all more or less share some characteristics in terms of the organization. So all of them are distributed research infrastructures. They have different levels of organizational maturity. Some of them have already established quality management systems for hubs and for nodes, and I guess are currently in the process of aligning this. Others may start in a way that they actually can do a very aligned implementation of quality management, because neither in the hubs nor in the nodes quality management as a formalized system has been established. And in others, yeah, like INFRAFRONTIER, quality management is existing at the hubs, at the national nodes, but has to be implemented at the hub. So one of the things that we do in CORBEL is that we have a quality management expert network established. And one of the first activities of this network was to come up with a document, a framework for quality management in the biomedical research infrastructures. And this document states that continuous development of community standards and references is a core activity of all of the research infrastructures. All of the research infrastructures endorse the methodologies and also the underlying mindset of quality management. However, since the biomedical research infrastructures offer quite a wide portfolio of resources and services, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Instead, we have formulated a core set of quality management principles, and they are shown here, and they cover the standardization as a basis for reproducible and traceable results, and that the research infrastructures have an important role, and they are also acknowledging their role in cataloging, developing, improving, and disseminating these community standards. All of the research infrastructures, biomedical research infrastructures, endorse the application of quality management methodology, which should lead to highest quality services and data, which in turn also then leads to highest quality sciences, highest quality science outputs. It is an important point is that all of the biomedical research infrastructures see that open access to research data is actually an important quality measure. And wherever applicable, independent assessment by a competent authority is the gold standard for quality management. I have not covered these certification processes in depth in this during this webinar. Then the use of internationally recognized standards like EFQM, like ISO, and other best practices. So this use should be, or these standards should be used wherever applicable. They may not always be applicable. And the biomedical research infrastructures also engage in the development of these internationally recognized standards where appropriate, for instance, working in these ISO or participating in these ISO working groups that set up new standards. We agreed on pooling best practice examples and guidelines in a shared resource. And we emphasize also the importance of training and quality management methodology for the research infrastructures and their users, which also includes to make the users aware that quality management is not only a kind of an unnecessary add-on that only costs money, but rather is really an important means to improve the overall quality of the scientific outputs. And we also stress the importance to create awareness and appraisal for quality management, and to clearly communicate how quality management contributes to improving biomedical research outputs. So this covers that. So these are the core principles that all of the biomedical research infrastructures have agreed on. And now I would also like to finally to talk in my last slides about the Korbel Quality Management Exchange of Experience workshop that we are currently organizing, which will take place from 18th to 19th of June in a small town, Freising, close to the Munich airport. And there the topics will be again the quality management and in distributed research infrastructures, but not necessarily in this lecture style, webinar style manner. So this is really about exchanging experience about the different applications, approaches of quality management in distributed research infrastructures. We will also cover the aspect of how data and service management are related to quality management. And an important thing that we would also like to emphasize and kick off at that workshop is the opportunity of quality management staff visits, staff exchanges that are provided through the CORBEL program, but also to another program called RI Train, which deals with training research infrastructure managerial staff. And there's opportunities for getting staff visits, staff exchanges funded, also for quality managers. And then there will be deep drilling exchange of experience on international standards development. So this participation, for instance, in ISO working groups, but also on experiences of updating from the older ISO specification of 2008 to the newer one in 2015. And then we will also have a session on self-assessment versus external assessment. So when to apply which. The registration is open. You can find you can find information and also the opportunity to register for that event through our events page here. And with that, I would come to my final slide, and these are two links. So the information on the Korbel Quality Management Exchange of Experience workshop can be found under this link. And then I also talked about the framework for quality management in the biomedical research infrastructures, which can be downloaded from Zenodo. And with that, I guess I would lead over to questions.
Thank you very much, Michele. If everyone would like to write their questions in the questions window of the GoToWebinar application, and then we will have a look. While you write, I'll start off with the first question, and that's: do you have a minimum standard of quality management that you would expect to see for a new node?
Yes. So, well, I can speak for INFRAFRONTIER. We have a minimum standard of quality of services that we would expect from a node, and which is usually also which we really check for in site visits, but also by exchanging. In our case, it would be, for example, materials that we exchange and see also in our European mouse mutant archive. We would also exchange frozen material and see whether the partners or the new partners could really work or deal with this. And I think that so this is the case for many of the research infrastructures, that they already have a kind of well, minimum standards formulated in order well, that is required for new national nodes to become part of the European research infrastructure. Whether this is in all cases really tied to the outputs of a quality management system. So in INFRAFRONTIER as yet it's not yet. So this would be based, as I said, on site visits and other measures, but it's not yet tied to a quality management system output.
Thank you. Then we've got some questions from the participants. The first one is there a central website for the guidelines and best practice?
So there's different resources like the ISO websites, like the EFQM website, so the European Foundation of Quality Management. There is no central website as yet dealing with the specific aspect of establishing quality management in such a distributed organization, like a distributed research infrastructures. But generally, you can find very good information about the general concepts of quality management, particularly in the ISO specifications, but also at the European Foundation of Quality Management.
So I think it's in relation to the Korbel expert group, but I think from what I hear from you, probably the answer is no. So related to that also, are there named people to contact for each research infrastructure?
We do have a list of quality management experts in our working group or in our expert network, and they are all of the research infrastructures in Korbel. So all of the 13 are represented in the working group, and so far we have not published the contacts on the Korbel website. Usually the hubs should know about those experts, but we can think about also. I would have to get the consent of the expert network members, but we could try to publish that on, for instance, on the Korbel website.
Okay, I think that's probably the last question we have time for. So what we will do is we will make both the presentation and the recorded video available through the YouTube channel and the Korbel website. Thank you. So then I'd just like to advertise our next webinar, which is Status Update on the Code of Conduct for Health Research Initiative. That's with Michele Meyerhofer from BBMRI ERIC. And the date for that webinar is the 5th of June at 15:30 Central European Time. So then the last thing I'd like to do is just thank Michele and thank all the participants for attending.
And also thank you from my side. And if you want to learn more about quality management in distributed research infrastructures, please consider registering for our workshop.